Jesus is worthy. And as we move through the Gospel of Mark, he is revealing himself as such, the Son of God, the true Lord. And as we are in the middle of the Gospel now, today we're in Mark chapter 9. As we're in the middle of the Gospel, there is a struggle going on. And it's a struggle that many of us, and maybe you too, have felt personally and in your own life. And that's the revelation of the true Jesus versus the Jesus that we want him to be. We tend to make Jesus out to be who we want. But when we know him truly, we can depend on him. We are in Mark chapter 9. It's page 844 if you're using one of the black pew Bibles. And Mark chapter 9 starts out on a high point, a mountaintop, literally a mountaintop experience. Jesus has pulled with him Peter, James, and John, 3 disciples, and they go together, they climb a mountain, and up on the top of the mountain, just the 4 of them, Jesus is transfigured. His clothes become sparkling white. The glory of the Lord is seen and evident. It's the true Jesus unpacked before these 3 disciples' eyes. And not just that, Elijah and Moses, who we talked about in the previous weeks, then come and are speaking with Jesus. Put yourself in Peter, James, and John's shoes. You're not sure what you're seeing or what you're hearing. But the Jesus whom you know to be powerful is now using the names Moses and Elijah with these 2 men who have appeared from heaven. And this is powerful. And they are terrified. And Peter's there. And we can always count on Peter to do something. And so he speaks and says, Lord, this is good. Should we cast some tents? Should we put some tents out? You know, one for you, one for Elijah, one for Moses. It's his way of kind of like, am I seeing and hearing what I'm hearing? And when he says that, the imagery gets more vivid. So Elijah had walked with God and was known, and the spirit of Elijah would come on one who would precede Jesus. That spirit was on John the Baptist. But now here is Elijah. Moses is a renowned prophet and leader. He's the one through whom the law of God was revealed. The first books of the Bible written by Moses, still revered to this day. And so they see the Old Testament just unpacking before their eyes and Jesus glorified. And now Peter speaks about the tents and a cloud descends on the mountain. From the Old Testament, a cloud signifying the presence of God. And from the cloud, from heaven, a voice comes, this is my beloved Son, listen to him. And then everyone is gone except Jesus and the 3 disciples. A clear word from the Father to whom Jesus is, the Son of God. So they're going down the mountain, and Jesus tells them, don't tell anybody about what you've just seen until I am raised from the dead. That's never happened. But this is what he's told them. And so they're debating among themselves, what does he mean, raised from the dead? Us, in hindsight, we look at it and go, he's talking about resurrection. In their time, they were wondering what that would be. But they've had this huge mountaintop experience even though they're confused, they are trusting enough that they are moving in the right direction. And they've seen enough now to know that Jesus is far more than they were imagining. And they come down the mountain. The other remaining disciples are there. Those remaining disciples down at the foot of the mountain are in a fight with the scribes. They're arguing. Mountaintop experience, coming down, and there's a fight. Ugh. Let's pick it up. Mark chapter 9, verse 14. When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them and scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed, ran up to him and greeted him. And he asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" And someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able." And he, being Jesus, answered them, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy. He fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, "How long has this been happening?" And he said, "From childhood. And it has often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you can, all things are possible for one who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, "I believe, help my unbelief." And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer." So the fight at the foot of the mountain was about the inability of the disciples to help the boy. You can almost see the scribes finally excited. They see it breaking apart. They see that Jesus and his followers are not able to do everything. And you can almost hear the scribes saying, "See, you guys aren't from God. You can't do this." And the disciples are just fighting. Now remember, this is after Jesus has given them authority and sent them out to drive out spirits and to heal diseases. And they have been successful at doing it and come back and return to Jesus rejoicing. And now they run right into a brick wall. It's like when you hit the next level. If you've ever played a game, you're like, "Oh, I defeated the level," and then you get to the next one, it's like, "I don't know what to do," right? Or if you've played a sport and you meet the next level of talent, or perhaps taking calculus in high school, that next level, it's like, "This isn't for me," right? And here the disciples have run into that. We can't do it. But they're fighting with the scribes, trying to save face, probably. The problem wasn't the strength of the demon. The problem was the misplaced faith of the disciples. They were trusting in past experience and their own abilities and not in Jesus, who has the authority and extended that authority to them over evil spirits. This self-concern will be highlighted later in the chapter when they are walking and fighting among themselves who's the greatest. And Jesus has to address that with them. So here we can see the mindset of the disciples. and how quickly we ourselves can take our eyes off Christ and rely on our own strength. We can't do it. Bree shared that clearly with us. Further, misconceptions about who Jesus is tend to erode faith, such that we start to ask, is he able? Can he accomplish? Can he do these things? We must know who Jesus is and believe the truth of him for a stable faith. So depend on Jesus who is able, church. So that starts, we see it in verses 14 to 19, and then in the debrief in verse 28 and 29, we see the disciples face their inability, and all of us too must face our inability. The disciples were not able to deal with the demon. They lost. They were not able to help the boy or his father. And Jesus makes the issue clear in verse 19 when he calls them a faithless generation. He's telling them, have faith. Look to me. And here we see in this experience also the character of God. In this faithless generation, to be patient and long-suffering with the people. He's patient with Peter, James, and John on the mountaintop in their confusion. He was gracious to take Peter to the mountaintop. You may remember last week, just previous to this, Peter had rebuked Jesus and said, these things aren't going to be, when Jesus was unpacking the gospel. And Jesus told Peter, get behind me, Satan. And now here's Jesus in his grace taking him up on that transfiguring mountaintop to see God in his goodness and glory. You see the graciousness and patience of God. This is God and his love for us. He labors with us and graciously lets us meet our end so we would look to him. In his final evening with the disciples, Jesus would patiently answer their questions. He would say, I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And they would say, but what do you mean you're the way? Where are you going? And he patiently answers them. You have seen me and know me, and to see me is to see God. And to know me is to know the Father. In John 14. And after his resurrection in John 20, he had appeared to some of his disciples, and there was another one, Thomas, who had yet to see him. And Thomas said, I don't believe you guys. Right? If he rose from the dead, bring him to me to him, let me see him, and I'm going to put my finger in his hands where the holes are, where the nails went through on the cross. I'm going to touch his side where the spear pierced him. God, in his grace, Jesus comes to Thomas and says, see, here's my hand. Put yours in mine. And here, feel my side. I'm good. I believe you. Right? Friends, do you see the love of the Father for us? Be patient with us. To see Jesus is to see God, and here we see his patience. And here we see him calling us to face our own inability like the disciples did. The disciples had felt powerful. They had felt the presence of God. Some of them had had a mountaintop experience. They had had success in their work and life and ministry as they followed Jesus. And now, all of a sudden, they don't. Their failure was related to faith. They weren't looking to Jesus, but trusting themselves, faithless. Jesus showed them that in the debrief. Verse 28 disciples saying, why could we not do this? Why could we not cast it out? He said, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. They didn't pray. They were faithless in that moment. Jesus is calling them to not just a certain kind of demon that can only come out by prayer, lest we start thinking, oh, we can just cast out demons without praying, because there's some that must come out without prayer. That's not what he's saying. He's calling them to a deeper spiritual life, a kind of life dependent on God. No one can have a full life without that dependency on God. I keep using the word depend. Here's some other words to think about what it means to depend on God. To live a life determined by God. To live a life controlled by God. That's what it means to depend. Let me make some connections here on this first part of dealing with the boy with the unclean spirit. Success is faithfulness to Christ in all circumstance. Success starts and stays with gospel belief and dependence. The disciples stepped out and were unsuccessful because they weren't looking to Christ. Friends, our success depends on trusting God who loves us and is patient with us to call us to himself. We may have a desire for good things, and we can have all kinds of motives for doing the right thing. I shared with some students Friday night at WPI, one of the things that kind of got me through childhood was a fear of my dad and his discipline. Right? I would do the right thing out of that fear. Some may have a desire for prosperity. Handle your money how God wants you to handle your money and watch what happens. Some may do the right thing because of how it makes us feel. Let me kind of lean in here a little bit, because as we've moved forward in the last 10 or 15 years with technology, more and more we are thinking about how something makes us feel rather than the truth behind it. And I referenced this last week, but a lot of it comes just from our scrolling through social media and the hits we can get off that. We start to do things because of how we feel rather than the truth of what God wants. But here's another way of saying this. Facing our inabilities is not a bad thing. It is actually a very good thing. When I was in high school, I did take calculus. The last time I took calculus, anybody else take calculus in high school? Anybody else say, not for me, after taking calculus or looking at it? And so I went into calculus, and the first couple of weeks, I got it. I was with it. I was hanging with it. And then we had our first exam coming, and I studied the night before. I really dove into it, paid attention, got all the things in, felt good going in. I was confident. And then that test was flipped over on my desk, and the clock started, and I knew I was in trouble. I studied the wrong things. I didn't know what I was looking at. Put my head down on my desk, said, Lord, I don't have a clue. I prayed. You ever been in that situation? I got nothing here. I'm going to pray. Lord was gracious to me. He helped me get through that test and calculus. But how many times in life do we do that? We just go in our own strength, and then it's like, oh, it ain't going to work. Friends, we need to face our inability. Hope that Bree's testimony encourages you this morning to face your own for the Lord. Secondly, verse 20 to 27. We see that Jesus is able, so let us depend on him. Let us be determined by him. Let our lives be controlled by him. This is a powerful moment in Jesus' ministry. His disciples are powerless. There is a celebrating and jeering group of religious scribes who are leaders. There is a demon-possessed boy and a distraught father. And what does Jesus do? He says, "Bring the boy to me." And the boy comes, and the spirit inside of him may be the one being in this story who knows who Jesus is at that moment. And he lashes out, throws the boy into terrible convulsions, such that he's writhing, he's foaming at the mouth, he's grinding his teeth, he's in seizures, throws him down, he becomes rigid. All this is going on with the boy, and yet Jesus remains calm. You can almost see him looking. And he looks at the father and simply says, "How long has this been happening?" Now, if you've been walking with Jesus to this point, you probably know he's done some remarkable things. He's walked on water. He's calmed storms. They've seen him calm a storm. Just say it, and the waves stop. Hey, he says it, we get no snow tomorrow. He says it, we get 5 feet tomorrow. He's that powerful. His will be done. They've seen him heal people. They've seen him drive out demons. And here, the boy, suffering and bruised, Jesus looks to the father. How long has this been going on? The father unpacks it. He gives some details. He's been thrown into fire and into water. It's tried to destroy him. But Jesus asked that question with intentionality because he's getting to the real issue of life. Right? And where the conversation goes, the boy is being bruised, but Jesus is powerfully working an eternal work. He's calling the Father home. Right? Because the discussion goes to something even more important, and that is about faith. Now, I talk a lot as your pastor about remembering God and what he's done for us. And it is very good to remind ourselves of these things. But our hope is ultimately built not just that we remember God, but our hope is ultimately secure and stable because God remembers us and remembers his children. And here, Jesus is remembering the Father and looks at him. And the Father says, "You can do something, please do it. You can do anything, have compassion on us, and help us." He's distraught. He's doubting. His life has been hard. This has not been easy parenting. My son played college football. I remember the day that I could no longer take him. Right? Like, oh, that's not going to work. He just beat me at a wrestling match. And you feel those moments as a parent going, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do, right? This father with a young child was way overmatched by Satan, a demon. That the father could have no control over it. But he's distraught. And he says, "If you can do anything, help us." And this is a very interesting statement. And I want to compare it with another one from Mark. Mark chapter 1. At the beginning of Jesus' ministry, Jesus is healing people. He's driven out demons. He's preaching in Galilee. And a leper came to him, imploring Jesus, and kneeling said to him, "If you will, you can make me clean." See the difference? The leper knows Jesus can do this and says, "If you will, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretches out his hand, touched him, and said, "I will be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him and he was made clean. The faith of the leper to say, "Jesus, I know you can do this. If it be your will, do it." And now here's this father, and this father may know enough of Jesus to know that Jesus would be willing to help, but his question isn't about the will, it's about the ability. If you can do anything, do something. His faith is weak, but at least he's moving in the right direction, into the right person. And here we need to be reminded the quality of our faith, friends. Let us trust the Lord and let Jesus fill us. So Jesus says, "If you can, all things are possible for one who believes." And the Father responds with honest humility and says, "I believe. Help my unbelief, Lord." Friends, your struggle may be intense and long. Your failures may be great. Jesus is willing and able to save and to help. He is with you through the trial of what you're going through. And so Jesus looks at the boy, looks at the spirit, rebuking it. "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." And that demon has no choice but to obey. And it gives one lashing out and leaves. And everybody looks, and it's as if the boy is dead. In fact, the Greek simply states it this way: Jesus raised him and he was resurrected. The Greek gives the implication Jesus just brought the dead to life. And this is what he does. You may feel dead inside. You may feel empty inside. You may be a Christian and a believer and tired of your struggles and feeling so hopelessly distraught. Face your inability and depend on Jesus, who saves us. There's a lot more that could be said here. Let me encourage us in closing with just some things to think about. When we depend on Jesus, that changes our life, because our life becomes determined by him and his plan and will. So let's live according to what he wants, entering each day in his strength. Life is a spiritual battle we will lose every time apart from Christ, and we will stand victorious always in Christ. So let us truly depend on him. Let us look for the opportunity to witness, serve, encourage, and bless others. And let us build each other up. Take a moment and look across the pew. In front of you, behind you, around you. These are brothers and sisters in the Lord. Encourage them. Build them up. The Father and Son no doubt left overjoyed, and the disciples were left confused. And Jesus says it comes down to faith. The disciples had misplaced theirs. The Father, very honest, "I believe, help my unbelief." And the Lord worked. Dependence on Jesus is open-handed. A life controlled by Jesus is a life that walks with open hands, saying, "Lord, your will be done today. Use me today how you will."